What is the worst cheating story you have ever heard? Someone I know is getting a divorce because her husband is having an affair with his 13-year-old cousin. Apparently the age thing isn't as big a deal, legally, in their location as the incest thing, but the whole situation is all sorts of freaking up. I had a former coworker find out his wife was filming a lot of amateur porn being paid next to nothing after being married for a few years. He found out when he found one of her DVD hidden in the house. He assumed it was a gift for his birthday in 2 weeks and watched it when she wasn't around. When he confronted her, her only reply was she was doing it for him. He imploded after that and needed counseling for a few months after the divorce was finalized. Dad had an affair while working overseas. Tells mom a year later. Makes her wait a week to tell the kids, so we're left wondering why mom is crying all the time. Dad promptly walks out right after the bomb is dropped, leaving kids and wife devastated. Don't hear from him for the next 4 months. Then proceeds to torment mother for the next year, making her believe they might salvage the relationship. Fast forward 3 years, brings woman from overseas and marries her in the courthouse without telling either of his children until 2 months afterwards. Meet my scumbag dad. I heard this story from a friend who's friends with a girl who has 4 boyfriends. On her birthday, she requested that all 4 boyfriends buy her the same purse. Neither knew of each other. The boyfriends complied, and she sold 3 of the purses for money and kept one of them. All 4 boyfriends are extremely pleased when they see her wearing the purse he got her. This story sickens me to the core. I was living with my GF of 2 years at the time. She was going to go to grad school in a new state. The plan was to switch jobs and move so she could go to grad school. I knew no one in the new state and hadn't been there before. I secured a job and moved out a few weeks early to find housing. It was then that she decided she wasn't sure what she wanted from the relationship and would cheat, thus beginning the most confusing and frustrating 3-4 months of my life. On the bright side, I've really enjoyed the new state, have met awesome people, and the job is pretty awesome. Okay, so this story is not as dramatic as the with brownies, and it is actually real though. We met when we were both young. We hit it off and get together. We moved to her homeland. I struggle with a new country, new language, getting a job, and all that. A few years into this, I find out there is some other guy. We fight, we make up. She promises not to see him again. Don't want to be a dictator, so when I find out she is still meeting him sometimes for lunch, I just try and be cool. On and off for years, I would worry about this and I would ask her regularly if between us was cool, and she would make me feel like this was all good. We move cities, we get a nice apartment, we start planning kids. I ask her to marry me, we have a huge engagement party, a year or 2 later we have a massive sick wedding. We have a crazy honeymoon. We start to pick dates on starting with a kid. We have a kid. A week ago, I see yet another text from this dude, and I just snap. I go into Uber detective mode, start cross-examining her, I pick out some details, I isolate her best friend and start getting out of her. My cunt wife lies every freaking minute, denying details, swearing in my face, but 10 minutes later admitting more for 3 freaking weeks. Every night is a nightmare as I try to come to terms with whatever news she just admitted, and in the morning I would ask yet again, is that really it? And no, there was always more. In the end, I just go to this freaking guy's house and he breaks down and tells me everything. They have been regular freak buddies for 7 freaking years. During our engagement, wedding, right up to where we started to go for kids. DNA test is in the mail. This freaking cunt wife was banging him bareback, actually contracted genital warts off him and never thought to mention it. His partner this whole time also had no clue. My wife freaking him in our own bed when I was away visiting family. An almost 15-year relationship down the freaking drain. I wouldn't even mind so much, but this guy is a big fat freaking mess. Gold to anyone who gives me some decent freaking advice right now. I had a friend whose husband cheated on her during his bachelor party. Apparently, there were 2 strippers who let guys touch them. Like really touch them. Everyone took turns fisting them. Then they took the groom into a room and freaking him. Nobody said a thing to my friend, of course, and the wedding happened a few days later. Since then he has cheated on her many times and she stays with him, because when she confronts him about things she finds out about, he cries and is really sorry. I had to stop being friends with her. This is so sad and pathetic. It really is. I want to feel sorry for your friend because of what she continues to go through, and her husband is obviously a gigantic piece of I've seen so many people stick around because their loved one knows how to turn on the waterworks and guilt trip them. I could understand it working the first time, but not all of the others. I completely see why you had to stop being friends with her. Cheating-related story. My boss, an enthusiastic outdoorsman and very gentle fellow, comes to work one day with a black eye and puffy face. I ask him what happened. He explains that there was a fist fight at the AGM of his hunt. Apparently there was a member who had recently split from his wife. They had just married and had had their first child. Unfortunately for their marriage, the child was born Chinese, both husband and wife in this instance being Caucasian. This chap didn't discover this until the child was born, whereupon his wife confessed to committing an act of desperate passion on the floor of a Chinese chip shop with one of the staff during her hen night. Bachelorette. My boss was injured in the fracas that erupted after one of the members of the hunt decided that 4 months after the fact was long enough, and that he could crack a joke about it during his speech to the assembled members of the hunt. He claimed afterwards that George had no sense of humor. Jennifer was set to marry the love of her life, Bradley. Tonight was her baccalaureate party, and she was determined to have one crazy night before the whole boring ball and chain thing with kids. Trying to relive the glory days of college, she had purchased a crate of vintage 2009 Four Loko that had been later banned by the FDA because they made college kids do even more after pounding 6 Four Lokos. A seemingly impossible bacchanalian feat, she attempted to give the stripper, but he was too coked out to get hard. She needed to get some form of meat, and the party decided to leave the house. After wandering drunkenly around, they ended up in the Chinese chip shop, where she began to hit on the cute Asian guy running the deep fryer. He initially turned down her drunk advances because the store couldn't afford another health code violation, which having dirty interracial Zacks on the floor most certainly would be considered. However, after she ripped off his apron and pants, he realized he didn't give that much of a freak about the health code violation because A, he was paid $8 an hour, B, he was going to get laid. He stopped caring and let Jennifer go to work on his. She eagerly shoved his down her throat like an African orphan gulps the biweekly rations they get. Needing to feel his throbbing 4-inch inside of her, she pushed him against the deep fryer and hopped on his. Wow, that sounds like a dirty Dr. Seuss book I should write at some point. Hop on, he wrote him furiously, and neither lasted long. As they climaxed together, Jennifer spasmed uncontrollably, which was unfortunate because she was next to the deep fryer, which caused boiling oil to spill on the unfortunate chip shop employee. She quickly hopped off and drunkenly out of the shop to 9 months of blissful marriage, which would end abruptly after she gave birth to a half-Chinese child. The chip shop employee wasn't nearly as lucky, as he died of third-degree burns covering 69% of his body.